January 12, 1942. Off the coast of New Guinea. The Pacific is deceptively calm. Moonlight ripples across the water in broken silver lines, just bright enough to betray movement, too bright for comfort. Beneath the surface, running silent at periscope depth, the American submarine USS Sargo creeps forward at 3 knots, electric motors humming softly through the pressure hull. Inside the control room, the air is thick with sweat, oil, and tension. Lieutenant Commander Tyrell D. Jacobs, skipper of Sargo, grips the periscope handles and brings the eyepiece to his face. The lens clears. A Japanese freighter slides into view. Big, slow, unescorted, a perfect target. Jacobs lowers the scope and turns to his torpedo data computer operator. "Solution? Set," the man replies. "Range 1,200 yards. Angle on the bow 090. Jacobs nods once. "Fire 1. The submarine shudders as the torpedo leaves the tube, compressed air roaring briefly before silence returns. The weapon streaks toward its target, its wake faint but visible under the moonlight. Everyone waits. 30 seconds. 40. Nothing. Jacobs snaps the periscope back up. The torpedo passes directly beneath the freighter's hull, clean, straight, and disappears into the dark beyond. No explosion, no flash, no kill. Jacobs exhales slowly through his nose. He doesn't swear. He doesn't shout. He has seen this before. Across the Pacific in the opening months of 1942, American submariners are fighting 2 enemies, the Imperial Japanese Navy and their own torpedoes. On paper, the Mark 14 torpedo is a marvel. Fast, long-ranged, packed with a 643-pound warhead, designed to detonate beneath a ship's keel, snapping it in half with a massive gas bubble shock. In reality, it is a catastrophe. Torpedoes run too deep. Magnetic exploders trigger early, or not at all. Contact pistols crumple on impact instead of detonating. American submarines stalk enemy shipping with skill and courage and watch their attacks fail again and again. Crews return to port furious, shaken, humiliated. Commanders file patrol reports filled with the same phrases. Observed hit, no explosion. Torpedo passed under target. Premature detonation. In some cases, torpedoes circle back toward the firing submarine, a malfunction that turns hunter into hunted. Men joke darkly about it, but the laughter is brittle. Japanese commanders notice something too. Captured logs, post-war interviews, and operational records tell the same story from the other side of the periscope. In early 1942, Japanese merchant captains report torpedo tracks passing harmlessly beneath their ships. Escorts hear explosions well short of the hulls. Damage reports are minimal. At fleet headquarters, officers exchange glances. The Americans, it seems, cannot shoot straight. Some Japanese officers openly mock American torpedo technology, dismissing U.S. submarines as ineffective, a nuisance, not a threat. The Imperial Navy concludes that surface combatants and aircraft remain the real danger. Submarines? Annoying, inconsistent, poorly equipped. The conclusion will cost them dearly, but not yet. Back aboard USS Sargo, Jacobs orders another shot. Fire 2. Again, the torpedo runs true. Again, nothing. The freighter sails on, unaware it has just been spared by a mechanical failure. Jacobs lowers the periscope and looks around his control room. The men avoid his eyes. He knows what they're thinking. Is it us? He knows the answer. No, he says quietly. It's the damn fish. In Pearl Harbor, Brisbane, Fremantle, wherever American submarines rearm and refuel, arguments break out between skippers and ordnance officers. Submarine commanders insist the torpedoes are faulty. The Bureau of Ordnance insists the men are mistaken. Tests, they say, show no systemic problems. But the tests are flawed, conducted under ideal conditions, at shallow depths, with torpedoes gently lowered into the water rather than fired at speed. Real combat conditions are ignored. So are the patrol reports piling up by the dozens. The result is paralysis. The submarines keep sailing, the torpedoes keep failing, and Japanese shipping keeps moving. By mid-1942, American submariners begin taking matters into their own hands. They disable the magnetic exploder entirely, relying only on contact pistols. Crude, unreliable, but sometimes effective. Even then, torpedoes slam into hulls at a 90-degree angle and fail to explode. Some bend, some shatter, some simply stop. Each failure chips away at morale. Each missed kill is another convoy that reaches Japan intact, carrying fuel, food, ammunition, raw materials, the lifeblood of an island empire. What no one in Tokyo realizes yet is how close the Americans are to solving the problem, not through committees, not through paperwork, but through anger, persistence, and a growing refusal to accept official explanations. Because somewhere in the Pacific, a handful of officers are about to break ranks and force the truth into the open. And when the torpedoes finally work, the sea lanes of the Japanese Empire will become killing grounds. June 3, 1942. Pearl Harbor submarine base. The dock is quiet in the early morning, but the mood is anything but calm. Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton, newly returned from patrol aboard USS Wahoo, stands on the pier with his hands on his hips, staring at a torpedo laid out on wooden blocks. Its steel casing gleams in the Hawaiian sun. On the outside, it looks flawless. Inside, Morton knows it is a liar. Around him, other submarine skippers gather. Men with weeks of sleep deprivation etched into their faces. Men who have stalked targets through moonlit seas and come home empty-handed. One of them breaks the silence. That's the fifth one this month that hit and didn't go. Morton doesn't answer immediately. He crouches, taps the torpedo's nose with his knuckles. Then it's not a weapon, he says flatly. It's ballast. The Bureau of Ordnance, BUORD, does not appreciate this language. Back in Washington, reports of torpedo failure are treated as inconvenient anomalies. Engineers point to test data, charts, assumptions. The Mark 14, they insist, performs as designed. The implication is clear. If the torpedo fails, the fault lies with the man who fired it. This is not merely a technical disagreement. It is a cultural collision. Submarine commanders operate in isolation, under lethal pressure, with only their crews and instincts to rely on. BUORD operates in offices, insulated from the consequences of error. Each side distrusts the other, and the torpedoes keep missing. In the South Pacific, the consequences are immediate and brutal. Japanese shipping continues to flow from the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies to the home islands. Tankers steam north unmolested. Cargo vessels deliver bauxite, rubber, and rice. Every intact convoy strengthens Japan's war effort. Every failed torpedo extends the war. Japanese commanders notice the pattern. In staff meetings, officers note that American submarine attacks are frequent, but rarely decisive. Damage reports remain low. Sinkings are sporadic. Confidence grows. Escorts are reassigned. Convoys sail with fewer destroyers. Routes remain predictable. The Americans, it seems, lack teeth. Morton, meanwhile, has stopped asking permission. On his next patrol, he orders his crew to disable the magnetic exploder completely. Wires are cut. Mechanisms removed. The torpedoes are now supposed to detonate only on direct impact. It is a risk, but doing nothing is worse. The first attack is tense. The torpedo strikes a freighter square amidships. It still doesn't explode. Morton slams his fist against the periscope housing. "That's not magnetic," he growls. "That's mechanical." Others reach the same conclusion. Across the Pacific, submarine skippers begin comparing notes. Unofficially, quietly. They trade stories over coffee and cigarettes, sketching impact angles on napkins, counting duds like scars. Patterns emerge. Torpedoes are running deeper than set, sometimes by as much as 10 feet. Contact exploders are collapsing instead of firing, especially at right angles. The evidence is overwhelming, but it is still unofficial. Then comes the moment Buord cannot ignore. Captain Charles Swede Momsen, an engineer with a reputation for blunt honesty, oversees live fire tests in Hawaiian waters. This time, the torpedoes are fired from submarines, at speed, under realistic conditions. The results are undeniable. Torpedoes run deep. Exploders fail. Again, and again, and again. The silence afterward is heavy. No one cheers, because every failed test represents a ship that should have sunk months ago. Word spreads quickly through the submarine force. The men are vindicated, but they are also furious. They have been fighting a war with a broken weapon, and now, finally, the truth is on record. Buord begins issuing modifications. Depth mechanisms are recalibrated. The magnetic exploder is officially deactivated. Engineers turn their attention to the contact pistol, the most stubborn failure of all. It will take time measured in lives. The Japanese remain unaware. Throughout late 1942 and early 1943, their shipping lanes continue to operate under assumptions built on American failure. Losses occur, but not at a scale that triggers alarm. Japanese naval intelligence concludes that American submarines are improving, slowly, but remain inconsistent. The idea that a technological switch is coming never occurs to them, and that is the most dangerous misconception of all. By mid-1943, new exploder designs are ready. Simpler, stronger, tested not in theory, but in practice. Submarine commanders receive them with cautious hope. No speeches are made, no promises given. The only question that matters now is the one every submariner asks before an attack. Will it explode? Soon the answer will change, and when it does, the mockery will stop. Because the sea does not forgive mechanical failure, and it does not forgive arrogance. October 7th, 1943, Philippine Sea. The night is pitch black. No moon, no stars. Just a low swell lifting the submarine gently, rhythmically, like breathing. At periscope depth, USS Tang slides through the water with predator patience, electric motors barely audible. In the conning tower, Commander Richard H. O'Kane wipes condensation from the periscope eyepiece and leans in. There, a Japanese convoy, silhouetted faintly against the horizon. 2 freighters, 1 escort. Nothing unusual, except tonight O'Kane trusts his weapon. Not fully, but enough. Set depth 10 feet, he orders. Contact exploder only. The words carry a different weight now. Months of argument, testing, and quiet rebellion have led to this moment. The Mark 14 torpedoes in Tang's tubes carry the redesigned contact pistols, reinforced furring pins, simplified mechanics, fewer ways to fail. They are not perfect, but they are no longer lies. Fire 1. The torpedo leaves the tube cleanly. No wobble, no porpoising. Its wake vanishes into darkness. O'Kane counts under his breath. 25 seconds. 30. 35. A flash blooms against the freighter's hull, followed by a deep, concussive thud that rolls through the submarine's steel skin. Men freeze. Then the sound reaches them. The sound they have waited nearly 2 years to hear. A true detonation. Someone exhales sharply. Another man grips the plotting table, knuckles white. No one cheers. They don't dare. O'Kane keeps counting. Fire 2. The second torpedo strikes moments later. Another explosion, larger. The freighter's bow lifts, then begins to settle. O'Kane pulls back from the periscope, his face unreadable. They work, he says quietly. Across the Pacific, similar moments unfold within weeks. USS Trigger, USS Wahoo, USS Harder. Submarines that once returned with stories of failure now report clean hits, confirmed sinkings, survivors in the water. The patrol reports change tone. No longer apologetic, no longer defensive, just factual. 2 torpedoes fired, 2 hits, target sunk. Japanese commanders notice immediately. In late 1943, shipping losses spike, sharply, unmistakably. Tankers fail to arrive. Cargo ships vanish mid-route. Escorts report sudden, devastating attacks with no warning and no malfunction. Convoys begin returning half-empty. Insurance rates soar. Ports clog with idle ships waiting for protection that no longer suffices. At Imperial General Headquarters, analysts pore over charts, trying to understand the shift. American submarines have not increased in number. Routes have not changed significantly, yet sinkings have doubled, then tripled. Something fundamental has changed. The mockery stops. In internal memos, Japanese officers no longer dismiss American torpedoes. Instead, they ask hard questions. Why are ships exploding cleanly now? Why are hulls breaking apart instead of absorbing hits? Why are escorts failing to detect attackers in time? The answers come too slowly, because the real answer is simple and terrifying. The Americans fixed their torpedoes. By early 1944, the U.S. submarine force enters what historians will later call its most lethal phase. Submarines begin attacking aggressively. On the surface at night, Untold. Inside convoys, sometimes firing spreads of torpedoes at point-blank range. Confidence returns. Initiative follows. The kill rates climb. In January alone, American submarines sink more Japanese shipping than in the entire first half of 1942. And unlike earlier successes, these sinkings target what Japan can least afford to lose. Tankers. Fuel becomes the crisis. Oil from Borneo and Sumatra no longer flows freely to the home islands. Refineries run below capacity. Training flights are cut back. Warships ration fuel. Destroyers escorting convoys find themselves unable to pursue contacts for long. The Empire's arteries are being severed, one explosion at a time. O'Kane's Tang completes its patrol with a staggering score. Back at base, there is no celebration, only quiet acknowledgement. The submariners know what this means. They are no longer a nuisance. They are now the primary executioners of Japan's economy, and Japanese commanders know it too. Post-war interrogations will reveal the moment morale begins to crack. Not at Midway, not at Guadalcanal, but here. In the realization that shipping losses are no longer random, they are systematic, unavoidable, and accelerating. The Mark XIV torpedo, once a symbol of American failure, has become something else entirely, a reliable killer. And the sea lanes of the Japanese Empire are about to become graveyards. Because when a weapon finally works, it does not forgive the time it was broken. May 4th, 1944, inland sea of Japan. The tanker is burning. Black smoke pours upward in a column visible for miles, staining the morning sky as flames lick across the deck. Sailors scramble uselessly along the rails, silhouettes against the fire, before the ship lists hard to port and begins to sink by the bow. Below the surface, USS Harder slides away at flank speed, her crew silent, listening to the fading chaos through the hull. Another tanker gone, another artery cut. By mid-1944, the impact of American submarines is no longer measured in tonnage alone. It is measured in absence. Fuel that does not arrive. Food that spoils in distant ports. Raw materials that never reach factories. Aircraft grounded for lack of aviation gasoline. Training flights cancelled. Naval sorties postponed indefinitely. Japanese commanders begin to use a new phrase in their reports: logistical paralysis. At combined fleet headquarters, the situation is grim. Charts once filled with projected imports are now scarred with red ink, losses exceeding replacements, month after month. Escort commanders plead for more destroyers. Shipyards work around the clock, but they cannot build faster than submarines can sink. And worse, they cannot protect what they build. American submarines are no longer just intercepting convoys. They are hunting choke points, straits, harbors, inland seas once considered safe. The Japanese home waters are no longer home. Rear Admiral Sowemu Toyoda, reviewing shipping loss figures, reportedly mutters to an aide, "We are bleeding to death at sea." It is not hyperbole. By late summer, Japan has lost more than half of its pre-war merchant fleet, and the losses are accelerating. The response is desperate. Convoys are tightened. Ships are rerouted along longer, less efficient paths. Crews are ordered to sail at night, blacked out, hugging coastlines where submarines can strike from ambush. None of it works. American commanders have learned too. They exploit predictability. They attack aggressively. They no longer fear their weapons failing. On board USS Tang, O'Kane briefs his crew before another patrol. "We don't waste shots," he says calmly. "We aim to sink." The men nod. They understand now. This is not harassment. This is execution. Japanese merchant sailors feel the change first. Survivors pulled from the water speak of sudden explosions without warning, of ships breaking apart in seconds, of escorts that never arrive in time. Rumors spread through ports. The Americans have perfected their torpedoes. Fear takes root, and fear changes behavior, slowing loading, delaying departures, creating bottlenecks that make attacks even easier. By the time the Battle of the Philippine Sea erupts in June 1944, the outcome is already shaped beneath the waves. Japanese carriers launch aircraft flown by pilots with fewer training hours than their predecessors. Fuel shortages limit rehearsal flights. Spare parts are scarce. The result is catastrophic. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot is fought not just in the air, but in the shipping lanes that failed to deliver what Japan needed to fight it. American submarines continue their work relentlessly. They sink more Japanese ships than aircraft and surface vessels combined. It is quiet, invisible, devastating, and it cannot be stopped. In Tokyo, planners face an impossible equation. They can defend the fleet, or they can defend the merchant marine. They cannot do both. They choose the fleet. The merchant ships die alone. By late 1944, Japanese commanders no longer mock American torpedoes. They fear them. And in that fear is the realization that the war has passed a point of no return. Because an island nation without shipping is not a nation at war. It is a nation waiting to collapse. Some officers understand the truth too late. Post-war, one Japanese naval officer will say simply, "We lost the war when we lost control of the sea lanes. Everything after was inevitable." He is right. But inevitability only becomes visible in hindsight. In 1944, all Japan feels is the tightening grip, and it is being applied by submarines, one explosion at a time. November 18th, 1944. Tokyo. The room is silent, except for the scratching of pencils. At a long table inside the Navy Ministry, Japanese staff officers study shipping reports stacked in neat columns. The paper smells faintly of ink and damp. Outside, the city carries on. Street cars, footsteps, distant factories. But in here, time feels compressed, heavy. The numbers are unmistakable. Monthly losses exceed imports by catastrophic margins. Tanker sinkings have reached levels no contingency plan ever accounted for. Entire convoy schedules have been crossed out, replaced by question marks. A captain clears his throat. At the current rate, fuel reserves will reach critical levels within months. No one argues. There is nothing left to argue about. By late 1944, American submarines are no longer just a threat. They are a certainty. Commanders now plan voyages assuming losses, not hoping to avoid them. Ships sail knowing they may not arrive. Crews are briefed on abandonment procedures before departure, as if that is the primary mission. Some captains refuse to sail at all. Others drink heavily before casting off. The sea has become hostile in a way no escort can fully counter. Across the Pacific, American submarine bases tell a very different story. At Fremantle, Pearl Harbor, and Midway, patrol boards are filled with chalk marks, sinkings, tonnage, confirmed kills. Crews rotate through briefings that are now brutally efficient. The torpedo problem is no longer discussed. It is assumed solved. Attention has shifted to tactics, coordinated wolf pack-style patrols, surface attacks at night, choke point interdiction. Confidence has replaced doubt, and confidence breeds aggression. The statistics are staggering. By the end of 1944, American submarines, less than 2% of U.S. naval personnel, have destroyed over half of Japan's merchant fleet. The shipping that remains is crippled by fuel shortages, lack of escorts, and inexperienced crews. Japan's industrial output collapses. Food shortages spread. Civilian rationing tightens. The effects ripple far beyond the Navy. Japanese commanders attempt one last adjustment. They disperse shipping, reduce cargo loads, send ships independently rather than in convoys. It only makes the submarines' work easier. One torpedo, one ship, no witnesses. Back aboard USS Tang, O'Kane watches through the periscope as another freighter begins to list. He does not celebrate. He has seen too much to feel triumph, but he understands the significance. This ship will not deliver oil. Those planes will not fly. That battle will not be fought. The connection is invisible, but absolute. In internal assessments, Japanese naval intelligence reaches a grim conclusion. Even if every remaining ship survived, Japan no longer has the fuel to operate its fleet at meaningful scale. The empire's striking power is gone. What remains is endurance, and endurance without logistics is illusion. By early 1945, American submarines range almost at will. They patrol the approaches to the home islands. They mine harbors. They sink ships within sight of shore. The psychological impact is immense. Japan is surrounded by water, and that water has turned lethal. Years later, historians will debate turning points. Midway, Guadalcanal, later Gulf, but beneath all of them lies a quieter truth. Wars are not won when weapons are built. They are won when weapons work. The Mark 14 torpedo, once ridiculed, once cursed, once blamed on its users, has done something no single battle could achieve. It has removed Japan's ability to sustain war. And when that happens, outcomes cease to be negotiable. The mockery is long gone now. So are the convoys. So is the illusion that the Americans could not strike decisively from beneath the sea. Because when the torpedoes finally worked, they did not just sink ships. They ended an empire's chance to continue fighting. August 10th, 1945, Tokyo Bay. The submarines are still out there, even now, even after the firebombing, after the cities burned, after the sky itself seemed to turn against Japan. American submarines continue to patrol the sea lanes with the same quiet discipline they have practiced for years. Habit, routine, momentum. Inside Japan's naval headquarters, officers no longer speak of victory. They speak of survival. And even that word feels strained. Fuel reserves are outgone. Merchant shipping is a memory. The few vessels that still float are tied to piers, immobile, useless without oil to move them. The sea, once Japan's greatest advantage, has become a prison wall, and everyone in the room knows why. When the emperor speaks 5 days later, his voice calm and distant over the radio, there is no mention of submarines. There doesn't need to be. The men listening already understand what has happened. The war was not lost in a single moment. It was bled away, tanker by tanker, freighter by freighter, by weapons that once failed and then never stopped working. In American submarine bases, the news arrives quietly. No cheers, no celebrations. Men gather in small groups, smoking, staring at bulletin boards, reading the same notice again and again, to be sure it is real. Some think of the ships they sank. Others think of the torpedoes that didn't work, and the months wasted because of it. Almost all think of the friends who never came back. Commander Richard O'Kane learns of the surrender in captivity, a Japanese prisoner after USS Tang was lost during its final patrol. He sits silently as a guard explains the news. Later, he will reflect that the war was already over, long before that moment. Finished the instant Japan lost control of its shipping. He is not wrong. Post-war interrogations of Japanese naval officers return again and again to the same theme. Not aircraft, not battleships, not even atomic bombs. Shipping. One former logistics officer puts it plainly. We could endure defeats. We could rebuild ships. But we could not fight without oil, without food, without movement. When the submarines became effective, the war became unwinnable. The Mark 14 torpedo becomes a footnote in most histories, a technical issue, a development problem. But to the men who fired it, and to those who sailed under threat of it, it was something else entirely. It was the difference between noise and consequence, between effort and effect, between a war that dragged on and one that collapsed. Japanese commanders who once mocked American torpedoes did so because failure breeds false confidence. They mistook malfunction for incompetence. They believed the sea would protect them. They were wrong. Because when the Americans fixed their torpedoes, they didn't just correct a design flaw. They unlocked the full potential of a strategy already in motion. Submarines became executioners. Shipping lanes became graveyards. And an empire built on maritime lifelines quietly suffocated beneath the waves. The final lesson of the Pacific Submarine War is not about technology. It is about persistence, about listening to the men at the front instead of the charts in the office, about understanding that modern war is decided not by what should work, but by what does. Long after the guns fall silent, the wrecks remain on the seabed. Rusting tankers, broken freighters, silent witnesses to the moment when mockery turned into fear, and fear into inevitability. The Japanese commanders laughed at American torpedoes until one day they didn't. It was already too late.